What's up everybody, it's Matt from Peter Glenn, and in this video we're going to talk to you about wakeboard sizing and how to find the right length for you. Let's check this out. So just like with all board sports, you want to have a wakeboard underneath your feet that fits you properly. And the way the wakeboard sizing works is it's a little bit more about the volume of the board, the weight of the rider, and the speed of the boat. Now a great way to kind of explain that is if you think about it, if you have something big underneath your feet that has more volume, basically more length, width, and thickness, you're basically gonna have something that's gonna float you better. If you have a bigger board, like a big paddle board, you can stand on top of that with absolutely no speed, just dead water, and you can stay on top of the water. But if you get into a smaller surfboard, you need to have some speed, and you need to have something to keep you moving across the top of the water to actually keep you afloat. The minute you slow down and you get to a slower speed, you do sink into the water. Now, wakeboard works that exact same way. If you have a bigger board underneath your feet, you can go a little bit slower with the boat. If you have less board underneath your feet, you need to go a little bit faster with the boat. But ideally, you want to find that ultimate size that fits perfectly for the combination of your body weight and the speed you feel comfortable riding at. So when you are looking at wakeboards, you'll notice that most boards are going to be in that lower 130 to upper 140 centimeter range. And some of the boards are only going to come in a few different sizes. If it's a women's board, usually you're going to be in those low 130s, getting close to the 140 range. If it's a men's board, you're probably going to be in the mid 130 range, even into some of those really big 150 ranges. But whether it's a men's board or women's board, you just want to match up your weight to the right size board. And not every board comes in every single centimeter. You don't see this Liquid Force RDX in a 138, a 139, a 140. There's going to be a little bit of a gap in between those sizes, and depending on the board, depends on those sizes. But again, as long as you can get yourself within a certain range, that's the most important part. Kind of a loose rule of thumb when it comes down to it is if you're in that like 100 to 175 pound range, usually you're gonna be looking at boards in those 130s up to those low 140s. Most of them, again, are gonna be in that kind of like 35, 36, 37, 38 range. It just depends on the specific board. And then from there, if you're in, let's say that 175 to let's say 225 range, you're probably gonna be looking at boards that are gonna be closer to that maybe upper 130s, getting into the 140s, maybe even into the mid 140s range, like this Liquid Force Remedy 142. And then if you're a little bit bigger than that, let's say getting into that 225 and up, then you're gonna wanna be looking at boards in those upper 140s, even up to like this Liquid Force Trip in a 150 down here. But again, all of these boards do come in multiple sizes. So no matter what your weight is, you should be able to find a board that's going to fit you properly and be best for your riding style. Now, when we're talking about this general size range for these boards and for your weights, we're talking about boards for behind the boat, your traditional wakeboard. Now, when you're starting to look at park boards for when you're riding cable parks, they're meant for a different style of riding. You're not really hitting the wake, you're more hitting those hard features like those boxes and rails, and they build these things with a lot of flex in the board, so you can kind of press them a little bit on boxes and rails. But if you got any questions about that, we'll leave a link in the video down below to the main differences between park boards and boat boards. But in general, when you are sizing a park board, you're going to want to bump up around 3 to 5 centimeters from what you would usually ride behind the boat. This is basically so you get a little bit of that extra stability when you are pressing the board, and since it is a softer flexing board, a little bit bigger board is going to give you a little bit more speed and give you a little bit more stability when you are riding a cable. But beyond all of that, this is obviously some very general information. It really can depend on the specific board, on the specific riding style. A lot of times it's really good to just check the size charts just to make sure you're 100% for that specific board, getting the right size that's within your weight range. Now, another thing you might look at too is if you're looking at those size charts and you're saying, hey, I'm in the weight range for the 138, but I'm also in the weight range for the 142. If you do fall into that category and you're in two different ranges, one thing that's good to do is ask yourself, do I like to ride a little bit faster? If so, you can go with a little bit smaller board. If you say I like to ride a little bit slower, then you're probably going to want to go with the bigger board. You're going to need a little bit more underneath you to hold you up on top of the water. But those are just personal preferences, and it's really up to you, and it's really hard to make the wrong decision. Another big question we get every single year too is, can I have one board that's going to fit the entire family? And the answer is yes and no. Ideally, you do want to have a proper fitting board for each rider, but obviously that can get a little bit expensive. And if you're just a recreational rider, you probably don't want to drop tons and tons of money to get every single size of board. But the one thing to note about that is if you are buying one board that's gonna fit everybody, look at all the people in your family and say, this is the biggest rider. You're gonna wanna get a board that's gonna fit them. And maybe look at the size ranges and say, this is the smallest board that could fit that person, but you're gonna wanna fit that rider. If a bigger rider is on a smaller board, you have to go faster with the boat, and that can be dangerous. It's better to have a smaller rider riding a little bit slower on a bigger board than a bigger rider going crazy, crazy fast on a board that's too small for them. So hopefully that helps you out a little bit. And like we said, this is kind of a good general way to get you started and try to figure out what size board you should be on, but it can depend on the specific board and on the specific company. But again, check those size charts if you have any questions beyond what we talked about in the video, or you can just leave some comments down below. We're on there every single day trying to answer those questions for you. We want to make sure we get you into some rad gear, but most importantly, we want to make sure it's going to fit you and it's going to fit your riding style properly too. Also make sure to like, subscribe, and definitely get that notification bell on too so you can find it when all the new videos drop. And head on over to peterglenn.com, get the right size wakeboard for you and your crew, and get out and ride. Because any day of riding is a good day of riding.